Welcome. This lesson, we're going to learn to convert a quadratic equation or a parabolic equation into vertex form, which will make it easier to graph or find its vertex, find its stretch. Because a lot of times quadratics are written where it's not. Sometimes it's called general form or other forms, but if you'll notice, I have all these variables here. By the way, I meant to make this one a squared, that first term of y squared. Now, this parabola we know is going to actually be opening left or right because of the y's that's being squared and not the x. But what we want to do is we want to get this expression into this form. X equals a parentheses y minus some vertical stretch squared plus some horizontal stretch. We want to get it into that form, which is kind of hard, but we can do it. The first thing I'm going to remember is that I want the x term on the left side of the equal sign by itself. So I'm going to actually move the two terms with the y's, the y squared term and the single y term, over to the right side of the equation first. Do leave the 38 on this side, and there's a reason for that. So I'm going to leave the 38, or the term that doesn't have a variable, and the x term, or the non-squared term. So I'm going to leave these two on the left side, and I'm going to put them in the x term first. So I'm going to do the minus 4x minus 38 equals, now I'm going to bring this term over, right? I'm adding 7y squared, so it becomes a positive 7y squared. I'm adding 28y, so I'm adding 28y. So if you notice, I had 1, 2, 3, 4 terms equals 0. I still have 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. I just brought these two terms to the right side of the equation. Now, the next thing I want to do is I actually want to get this y squared term to be a single 1y squared, not a 7y squared. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually divide everything by 7, all 4 terms. Or in other words, that whole left side by 7 and the whole right side by 7. But I like to keep them as separate terms, so I do each term by 7. So that gives me a negative 4/7 x minus 38/7 equals y squared plus, we're really lucky with this one, 28 is divisible by 7, so it's going to be 4y. If that hadn't been if 28 wasn't divisible by 7, this would be a fraction, and that's perfectly fine. But it happened to be 4, which is nice. Now, what we want to do is we want to make the right side of this equation a perfect square. I need to add in a missing term that makes it a perfect square. And I'm hoping you remember from a previous lesson, this missing term has to be half of this value squared. So I take half of 4, which is 2, and I square it, which is going to be 4. But now be careful. I just added 4 to the right side of the equation. I don't want to change the equation, so if I add 4 to the right side, I need to add 4 to the left side. So I'm adding 4 to both sides of the equation. What that does is it makes this a perfect square trinomial. I can write it as a single set of parentheses squared, where I have the y, and then half of 4 was 2, and it was positive, so I put plus. If you need a refresher on that, go back and watch the video from before Christmas that dealt with completing the square. And that's really kind of what we did. But we're not done with this problem because we're not quite finished simplifying this. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the 4 to this negative 38/7. So I need to get a common denominator. So I'm going to make that 4 over 1. I'm going to multiply top and bottom by 7. So that's going to be 28 over 7 minus, because it's a negative, minus 4/7 x minus 38/7. Now I can combine these two fractions because they have a common denominator. 28 minus 38 will be negative 10. So I'm left with the negative 4/7 x minus 10/7 equals, in parentheses, y plus 2 squared. So I just added those two terms, those two non-variable terms together, or the 4 to the negative 38/7. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this fraction over here. So I'm going to add 10/7 to both sides. Add 10/7 to both sides, which will cancel that, leaving me a minus 4/7 equals, parentheses, y plus 2 squared plus 10/7. We're almost vertex form. Remember, I want it to look like this. Whoops. Now that I looked back up there, I dropped something. I dropped that x. That x goes right here. So don't forget that. There's an x there. Now, what I'm going to do, the last step, is I need to get the x completely alone. So I'm going to multiply or divide, however you want to think about it, everything by a negative 4/7. So I divide by a negative 4/7, and I divide by a negative 4/7. Now I'm hoping and praying you're comfortable with dividing by fractions and how you do that. Because what happens is this negative 4/7 and this negative 4/7 cancel, leaves me the x. When you divide by a fraction, you flip it, right, and multiply. So this is going to flip upside down, 7/4. I keep the negative in front, and I put that in front of the parentheses. I don't go inside the parentheses because I can't, because of the squared. So in other words, I just flipped it up and put it in front. This is exactly the same. If you need me to show you that or review that with you in class, please let me know. Here, positive divided by a negative will be minus. And then I'm going to take that, I'm going to do this off to the side. 10/7 times a negative 7/4. 7's cancel. That leaves me a 1 and a 1. 4 and 10 have a 2 in common, so that's a 5 and a 2. So it's a 5/2, or 5/2. And I'm done. I've written that quadratic in vertex form. X equals a, parentheses, y plus 2, parentheses, squared, minus 5/2. And remember, that's vertex form. X equals a, parentheses, y minus k squared plus h, right? So I know that my vertex is at negative 5/2, because this is my x value, because it's the x equals y squared. So I know my vertex is at negative 5/2, negative 2. That's my vertex. And I know my stretch is a negative 7/4. Or my a value is negative 7/4. Hopefully you were able to follow that. If you need to, go back and watch through it slowly, or ask me to go over it again with you in class, and I'll be more than happy to do that.